This is session 9 of project management, and in this session we're going to have a look at risk and some of those hard and soft issues that tend to turn up in project management and leadership. Well, in this project management session 9 we're going to have a look at two key issues: the evaluation of progress and the identification and management of risk. Slide 2, the evaluation of progress. It's important to identify the context in which a project is set up, and we refer to this as the big picture. Once the context of the project is understood, success criteria are identified, plans created and the team assembled, it's important to monitor progress. And it's important to plan ahead to avoid the tendency for the project leader to firefight. Project control and monitoring tools need to be appropriate to the particular project. And the project team needs to perform to a high standard and cope effectively with changes. All stakeholders need to remain committed to the project as developments occur. And as the project proceeds, the context of the big picture provides the basis for testing whether all the elements are still on track. So your study questions for this slide are these. What methods do you use to evaluate the progress of the projects in which you may be currently involved? Do you feel that the monitoring tools are appropriate, and, if not, can you identify any other ways of evaluating progress? Slide 3. Planning and review. Now, planning's not just carried out at the start of the project, but needs to take place throughout its development. Continuous cycles of planning, doing and reviewing must take place. The greater the uncertainty and innovation involved, the more important is this process. Regular meetings need to take place, and the Scrum approach takes particular account of this issue. A SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, can sometimes be useful at various stages, and let's look at these in turn. In terms of the strengths, we would ask what's going in our favour. In terms of the weaknesses, where are we vulnerable? In terms of the opportunities, what can we capitalise upon to carry us forwards? And then the threats would be related to what can derail us. Now, the study questions for this slide are these. Do you engage in continuous cycles of planning, doing and reviewing? Do you carry out a SWOT type analysis in the projects in which you are engaged? Just give some thought to these questions before moving on to the next slide. Slide 4. Reflecting and objective assessment. Now, we tend to be action-oriented when working on projects and often feel that we have to be busy and to be seen to be busy. And this tends to push introspection, progress analysis and reflection aside in terms of behavioural activity. However, they are useful tools, although for many people who are action-oriented, they do not come naturally. Learning theory shows that the natural process of reflection is key in promoting effective learning, something the project team needs to engage in constantly. The concept of taking the helicopter view whilst addressing specific issues in a split screen mode is valuable as part of the ongoing evaluation process. And this helicopter view is sometimes referred to as the view of the balcony, or the view from the balcony, as a metaphor for standing back for the project to actually take stock. So your study questions for this particular slide are these. Do you plan reflection and introspection sessions for you and your team members? To what extent is taking the helicopter view part of your way of leading and managing the projects in which you are engaged? Slide 5. Project control and monitoring systems. Now, in the past, project control systems were seen as a prerequisite for success in implementing a project. However, in recent years, the tendency has been that we need to address three important issues specifically. Firstly, that the prime role of a monitoring system is not to control the project, but to provide information to enable the team to manage the project effectively. Secondly, the systems must be simple in order to be effective, and not an end in themselves. And thirdly, the systems used must have the support of the whole team and not be seen as something you do when you do not have proper work to do. And the planning review system involves the review phase, discussion with stakeholders, adjusting the plan and then taking action. And this leads to the concept of plan-do cycles, which we're going to see in the next slide. But in the meantime, just give some thought to the study questions. How effective are your monitoring systems at providing information on progress in order for the team to manage the project effectively? Are your systems simple and effective? And do they have the support of the whole project team? Slide 6. Plan-do cycles. In this slide we see in the top part of the slide the classic planning, doing and discussion phases. Discussions are held with a view to creating revisions, adjusting the planning phase, modifying the doing phase, and then once again going into the reviewing phase, which leads again into the discussions, and so on and so forth. In the lower part of the diagram we see the idea of continuous reviewing cycles culminating in successful project completion. So your study questions for this slide are these. With the projects in which you are currently engaged, do you regularly operate discussion, planning, doing and reviewing sessions? And to what extent is this a continuous process? Slide 7. Monitoring issues. Now, the basic issues involved in project monitoring include the following. Firstly, identification of intermediate targets, making notes on critical events, times or bottlenecks, being aware of costs incurred and resources used, quality assurance issues, the extent to which performance specifications are being adhered to. And then, of course, there's managing the people issues. What is the climate and atmosphere in the project team? Is it buoyant with high morale, or has there been significant reaction to downturns in the progress being made? So, before moving on, give some thought to the study questions that this tends to raise. Firstly, how effective are you at identifying intermediate targets? Do you keep an ongoing monitoring process to keep track of project costs? How effectively do you monitor the people issues, both within the team and with the other stakeholders? Slide 8. Project risk, a definition. We now move to the subject of project risk. Two leading authorities on project management, the Project Management Body of Knowledge and the Association of Project Managers, have created the following two definitions. Firstly, project risk management is defined by the Project Management Body of Knowledge, the PMBOK, as, and I quote, the processes concerned with identifying, analysing and responding to uncertainty. It includes maximising the probability and consequence of positive events and minimising the probability of adverse events to the project objectives. End of quote. Now, the Association of Project Managers defines project risk as, and again I quote, the factors that may cause failure to meet the project's objectives, or limit the achievement of your objectives as defined at the outset of the project. Now, risk to a project may present itself from a number of sources, as we will see in the next slide. Before moving on, however, please give some thought to the following study questions. Firstly, what would be your own definition of project risk, to take into account any project in which you are currently involved? What are the main sources of risk facing your project? Slide 9. Managing project risk. Typical risks to projects tend to involve some or all of the following issues. There are natural risks, and to address these risks we should use statistics, probability data, and draw on the experience of others as well as yourself. Then we have product liability risks. You can reduce this source of risk by thorough planned testing, product recall, and effective quality management. Thirdly, we've got technical risks. To tackle these risks, build in extra budget, prototypes, milestone performance reviews, and so on. Business risks. Handling business risks involve good leadership and using experts where appropriate and being aware of the early signs of possible problems. Personnel risks. To avoid the risk of losing key personnel, build in contractual agreements, make it a good place to be, and create no-strike agreements. And then there are psychological risks. To reduce these, have a good coach and mentor and talk through issues with colleagues. So, our study questions for this particular section on managing project risks are these. What specific steps can you take to reduce the risks facing your project or projects? What steps have you taken to reduce the personnel and psychological risks? Slide 10. Typical sources of project failure. Finally, for this session 9, it's useful to identify some of the reasons why projects fail so that we can avoid these risks by paying attention to the issues involved. Well, the major reasons for project failure include many issues, but in particular the following. Poor risk assessment and lack of effective PRAM, which is project risk analysis and management approaches. Lack of project management authority. Poor estimating. Poor planning. Ineffective project team management. Unclear objectives. Poor monitoring and control. And a lack of learning from mistakes. So give some thought to the study questions before moving on to the bibliography. How would you assess your effectiveness at avoiding the project failure sources mentioned in this slide? To what extent are your project team members aware of these possible sources of failure? Do the study questions again. Study questions. How would you assess your effectiveness at avoiding the project failure sources mentioned in this slide? To what extent are your project team members aware of these possible sources of failure, and are they working in ways to minimize those risks? Finally, to finish off session 9, slide 11 gives some references. The main reference for this session is the book Project Leadership by Bryner, Geddes and Hastings, and we've referred to this in earlier sessions. Operations Management is also a useful source, as is the Guide to the Project Management Body of Knowledge PMBOK Guide, and further details of this publication may be found with a Google or similar internet search. So that's the end of session 9. I hope you found some of the ideas useful, and then I'll speak with you again in the final session, session 10. Thank you.